Well, good evening, everybody. It is Tuesday night of Monsoon Awareness Week, and I am so glad that you're able to join us. Today, we are going to be talking about downburst winds and the associated threat of kind of blowing dust that are associated with those. Let me introduce myself. My name is Tim Bryce, and I am a forecaster with the National Weather Service in El Paso, Texas. I've got an esteemed panel joining me here today. First, I'd like to introduce Kerry Jones. He's a warning coordination meteorologist at the National Weather Service office in Albuquerque. And also joining us is James Sawtell. He's a forecaster over in the Phoenix office for the National Weather Service.
Hi, Tim.
How are you, sir?
Good. How are you doing?
And
hello to my hometown of El Paso.
It is hot here, so very good. And a very special guest today is Mr. Tom Walsley. He is an emergency manager in the county of Bernalillo in New Mexico, and he's here to talk to us, help us kind of see things from the perspective of the emergency manager. So thank you for joining us. Well, we're going to be talking about a quick example. I want to show everybody an example right off the top of the bat what I'm talking about when I'm talking about downburst winds, because last year the National Weather Service office in El Paso, Texas got clobbered. We had a downburst right on top of our office, and once this gets playing here, the downburst happened right on top of our office. We had a 78-mile-an-hour wind gust. You can see all the dust that gets kicked up from it as it goes out. And then the amazing thing, it kind of rains for just a little bit, and then it just simply evaporates and disappears. It blows me away every time I see that. So we'll do it one more time. But this is what we're talking about when we're talking about a microburst or a downburst. The way I kind of describe it is like a giant balloon. You know, if you have a water balloon, as I tell the kids in school, I say, you know, if you ever played with a water balloon and you've dropped one of those on the table, that's what you're looking at. It just hits the ground and then it spreads out in all directions. And I think, you know, it used to be a case where we didn't have many great pictures of these microbursts or that. But in the last few years, because so many people have cell phones and cameras, we can all we've seen more and more examples of these showing up. So it's been much more photographed. I know Tucson's got a good image of one. I know that Phoenix had a good picture of one, but it's definitely been picking up. But as a matter of fact, while I was thinking about it, I just saw this today as well. So I want to show this one real quick as well. So let me change screens here. And one more time, and this will be our last kind of example, but it was rather impressive as well as it comes across. And I wish this came across a little better because on my computer, I'm double streaming here, so we're taking up a lot of bandwidth here. But basically, this is over in Austria. This happened just 2 days ago, and you can see the storm. It's a great example of the storm making its way over a mountain and then over, I don't know if that's a large lake or a river, but you can just see at one point it just drops this big, like a giant water balloon right there, hits the lake or the water, and then you can see the wind as it hits up towards the camera and everything. So it is very impressive, and that just floated across my social media feeds today. So like I said, there was a time when this downburst was kind of a hard animal to describe and picture, but now we've seen more and more of these examples. So I want to open things up as we're kind of talking along here. Kerry, what is the most, I guess, significant threat, or which threat most concerns you? Is it the wind, the blowing dust, or what when it comes to a downburst?
Well, I would have to say first, good evening, Tim. Another great job. We enjoy these hangouts. I mean, clearly with a downburst, it's the wind, right? The wind, the impacts of the wind. And, you know, when you talk about damaging wind, I think a lot of folks, you know, we want to talk about tornadoes. But honestly, a downburst like what you just showed and all those examples, you know, you're talking about wind speeds 60, 70, 80 miles an hour, perhaps 100 miles per hour. So that could do a tremendous amount of damage. I mean, life-threatening damage. So, but of course, yeah, blowing dust, is also a big concern. I know that's a topic as well, but certainly you get the dust from the high winds, but it's that evaporative cooling that you mentioned, that really very intense winds. So it's, and we, like you said, we see it just about every year. And now that we have lots of folks with cell phones, cameras, we're just capturing them more often. In fact, I saw one just recently from like a security camera at a business. It was pointed in just the right direction. You could see just that outflow just hit the ground and spread out. So
it's amazing. But you had, didn't you shared with me some pictures earlier today from a downburst that you did a survey on. Can you, do you have those handy?
I do. Give me just about a second.
No problem. Let me, I'll bring in Thomas here. I'll bring in Tom. From an emergency manager's point of view, is there any way for you guys to kind of prepare for one of these things? Because not every thunderstorm has them. They don't occur, you know, they seemingly occur kind of randomly. And, you know, for you from the emergency manager, how do you kind of get yourself ready, or how do you get your community ready for an event like that?
So we've been able to get pretty involved in at least the county special event planning. And so any of the events that the county is sponsoring through, say, Park and Rec, we're through that committee. So we can, you know, at least get the word out that have a weather plan. We know that it's coming up, so those, you know, tents need to be secured. Anything that can blow away most likely will. I think that's the biggest thing that we can do, and really just, again, pushing the messaging with, you know, the soccer games and the rest of it, when we have those things that, you know, can become pretty dangerous weapons.
Definitely. And again, go ahead. You know, one of the, I guess it's just like almost all threats is being prepared ahead of time, knowing that there's a potential. And we can maybe talk about some of the potential signs that we might see a downburst on a day. But I you know, just being prepared and having an idea that this might happen is the first step in being ready. So you know, I agree with you. Just getting people informed. If you're trying to react to it as it's happening, it's not gonna help. You kind of need to know ahead of time, at least that the potential's there, and then what you might do. And we'll talk about that some more here going forward. I forgot two little housekeeping things. First of all, if you've got any questions, we've got our hashtag up and running. Feel free to tweet us a question on Twitter, of course, using the hashtag Monsoon 2018. And I would also like to welcome everybody who's watching live on Facebook as well. So we're going YouTube and Facebook at the same time. So I see several people on there from Susie and Cora, Angela, Kathleen, Bonnie, and John. So we got a lot of people watching on Facebook as well, watching here on YouTube. So really great. Thanks to everybody joining us. I did want to also show from another video from this microburst that we had last year on the El Paso office. The downburst came right on top of our radar. So again, talking about that water balloon falling out of the sky and falling out. Anytime you see red on this is our velocity. One of the neat things about Doppler weather radar is that it allows us to see which way the winds are blowing. Anytime you see red on the radar, the wind is going away from the radar. Anytime you see green, the winds are moving towards the radar. And in this case, you can see it's very unusual. It's red all the way out in all directions, and that means the microburst or the downburst came right down on top of the radar and then spread out in all directions. Just like if you dropped a water balloon on a table, it spreads out in all directions. Now, as that you know, wind spreads out in all directions, we end up getting many times it starts to pick up dust and everything. And I'd like James to sit there and comment, because James is there in the Phoenix office, and I think they are like the world capital for haboobs, and that's just the meteorological word for a big dust storm caused by a thunderstorm. So, James, what are some of the haboobs that you guys have seen there in Phoenix, and then maybe transition and talk into some of the new tool that you have to kind of get the warning out about those ahead of time?
Sure, Tim. Well, over the years, we've had we've had actually so many haboobs over the years that they've all kind of become a blur. But we've had some very exceptional ones. I remember in 2011, there was one that was all across the valley. It came up from the southeast, and it was probably better than 3,000 feet tall, and it was so wide that it reached from one end of the valley, of the Phoenix Valley, to the other end. So it was dozens of miles wide. And a lot of our dust storms, as they make their way into the city, will produce their strongest impacts on the outskirt of the city and in the desert south of the city. But this one really held together because the wall of dust was so intensely dense that it held together as it went all the way through the valley, including downtown, including our office, which is a few miles east of downtown, the airport between our office and downtown. And everybody was really freaked out. It was just the wildest haboob that people had seen in a long time. And the great thing about what we're doing this year, which is a very hot topic around here right now, is that we've got some new tools to deal with these dust storms. And it's the Polygon dust storm warning and the Polygon dust advisory, as we touched on last Sunday. And this is the first season that we'll be testing these Polygon dust storms and Polygon dust advisories. And we're really excited because it will dramatically improve the accuracy of the dust storm warnings and the dust advisories in terms of timing and spatial coverage. And more importantly, it's going, or just as importantly, it's going to be much more accurate with who gets the WEAs on their mobile phones. So if you get a dust storm warning alert on your mobile phone through the wireless emergency alert system this year, take it more seriously than ever before, because that means you're probably inside our Polygon. In years past, we've had problems where with the zone-based dust storm warnings, the warning was going well beyond the forecast zone. And that was a whole different animal because it was a zone-based warning. And people well outside of the area were getting these wireless emergency alerts on their cell phones, even people outside of the state in some cases. And that was just a huge problem. And so now we've got this new tool that we've trained on, and now we're getting ready to actually use it for the first time this year.
We had the same problem. We have the dust storm warning the way it used to be. It was zone-based, and that we would issue it for a small, you'd want to issue it for a small area, but since it was a zone, and the zones here in the western part of the United States can be pretty huge, we were way over warning and tone alerting people's weather radios and things that were nowhere near this. So I'm excited to hear about that. That's going to be a great tool moving forward, and a great way to kind of
we're super excited.
Get everybody excited about it. You're right.
Super excited. It's all everybody's been talking about around here.
Very good. So, Kerry, were you able to track down your pictures?
I did. Let me see. Yeah.
Go ahead and see if you can screen share us.
I'll do it.
Now, I got a question on Facebook talking about where Hurricane Bud is, And we'll do that here in just a second. I'll talk about what we're expecting this week. One of the things that we joked about this week is that we could see all the monsoon threats that we're talking about this week as we're moving along, because we're really hot today with the heat, and then we're going to transition to thunder and lightning and downbursts and maybe flooding rains by the weekend. So go ahead, Carrie, take it away.
It's interesting how this week has worked out in terms of the topics, right? As you said, starting out with heat. So on June 3rd, we had some severe storms that moved actually through a lot of our area. And in fact, this cluster of storms, Tim, was the same. Did you hear about the American Airlines jet that was flying from San Antonio to Phoenix and encountered some severe storms? We think somewhere over southern New Mexico. Well, as we did some research, it turns out it was the same thunderstorms an hour earlier before they hit this area that the American Airlines flight encountered. So this was the result of downburst winds, straight line winds. And this was a case of a very old barn that's probably lived through a few New Mexico springs, springtimes. But this was a case where the winds from this outflow from the thunderstorm literally flattened this barn. And if you look closely, there's actually a tractor trailer. It was empty, but it was turned or flipped 90 degrees by that wind.
Oh, wow.
So we estimated winds, around 70, perhaps a little bit stronger, 75, that did this damage. And if I scoot back one slide, this was the remains of a mobile home.
Oh,
and
wow.
We always, of course, stress that, being inside of a mobile home in any type of severe wind is not where you want to be. And this just goes to show you that not only did that wind push this mobile home off its kind of center blocks there, it's kind of foundation, but it rolled it almost 2 times.
Oh, wow.
And fortunately, nobody was in this at the time of the damage, but this just kind of goes to show that winds of that magnitude, I mean, in this case, pretty much demolished the single-wide mobile home, but they did that other damage. So damaging winds from thunderstorms they're very localized, as we've talked about. The other thing is we're talking about minutes. In some cases, 2, 3, up to maybe 5 minutes, and it's over. So we have a hard time detecting, which gets to your point earlier, that we recognize the environments where these downbursts can occur, but sometimes you just don't get the advance notice.
Right.
Yeah.
So that's impressive. And I do have a picture here of the American Airlines flight. It was diverted to El Paso, and they landed it. So here is what the front end of the American Airlines flight looked like. You can see the 2 main windshields are shattered, and the nose cone is practically demolished. So that was the hail associated with the storm that Carrie was showing, as far as it was doing the wind damage there around Roswell. So, wow, it was quite impressive storms that we had those days. And that just goes to the fact that you can have heat one day and get a little bit of moisture. And as we'll be seeing here in the next few days, we're gonna start to trickle in moisture, especially into the eastern part of Arizona, into the western part of New Mexico. We're gonna start to trickle in that moisture, and that's gonna maybe on a regular day when it was like 90 or 95, nothing would happen. But when you're hitting 100 degrees or more in the lowlands, it's able to convert that heat very efficiently into these thunderstorms. And then there's not really that moisture to keep it going, and you end up with a big area of evaporation underneath it. And that's when you can get one of these microbursts. It definitely can cause a problem. I wanted to talk to Tom a little bit more about the dust storms that we can see from these storms. How often are you guys there in Bernalillo County affected with kind of the blowing dust kind of situation that you can see from these? Oh, you're still muted, I think. There you go.
I'd say, I don't know if Carrie can correct me if I'm wrong, but at least up in the Albuquerque area, I can't really think of too many significant dust storms. Obviously, smoke is probably the thing I think we would remember or be more familiar with. Carrie?
Yeah, I mean, we in 2011, I think James mentioned 2011, which was a really horrible spring, windy spring. Our June was actually in Albuquerque, one of the driest and windiest springs on record. And so we did have some of these sort of small scale haboobs, nothing like what James shared. But we did have some events where, I mean, certainly in my time in Albuquerque, I had never seen anything quite like what we had in 2011. But Tom's right. They're generally pretty rare for us, probably just kind of owing to the fact that we have kind of the mountains real close by to the east, and we just don't have a lot of source regions where most of our storms come from directions where there's not a lot of time, I guess, for that dust to get picked up. But, you know, we do on the west side of Albuquerque do have issues with dust, wind, but not anything like what Phoenix has. So.
Right. Well, that's good. El Paso gets them every once in a while, but again, nothing like Albuquerque gets. But we do have problems out west of town between Tucson and El Paso. There's a large salt flat, and we do get a lot of blowing dust out there. And we have had, unfortunately, several fatalities around the Lordsburg area of New Mexico. So it does occur, and it's something to be something for people to be aware of. So, you know, as we transition to that, let's talk about some of the safety things. You know, I'll real quickly go over kind of, if you looked up into the sky, and if you've ever seen a day where you've got those fingers kind of hanging down from the clouds, and you know it's a day that we call Virga, but it's the rain is evaporating before it's hitting the ground. That's potentially one sign that we could have some of these microbursts on that day. It doesn't mean every thunderstorm is going to drop a microburst. It doesn't mean that you're going to be hit by one. But what it just means that some of the conditions are there to be potential. But once the dust hits once the wind hits the ground and starts to pick up the dust, I was wondering, James, can you kind of go over some of the safety tips if you're in your car, what you're expected to do to be safe? You know, in your car. I think there's a lot of conflicting messaging out there. So I was wondering if you could kind of clear that up for us.
Sure, Tim. So the main thing you have to remember, just to make it real simple and not complicated, is just remember this: pull aside, stay alive. And that's the short version, but just to expand that out just a little bit, if you encounter a wall of thick dust or you see it approaching, pull aside before you get into it, and turn off your engine, pull aside as far as you can, and you'll be much better off than if you actually get into it. If you do get into it, it's basically the same rule. You want, if you're all of a sudden, if your visibility goes from 10 miles to 10 feet in a couple of seconds, or maybe even 0 feet, you really need to pull over. And you decelerate, you pull over to the shoulder, and then try to get off even beyond the shoulder as far as possible. Take your foot off the brake so that cars behind you can't see your car and use you as a steering guide and thus rear end you. And then once you've taken your foot off the brake, you want to put your car in park and shut off your engine and just wait it out. That's the safest thing to do. And the thing is, in many of these dust storms, your visibility will probably come back up relatively soon. So that's the good thing. You won't be there forever, but at least you're going to be safe. In situations in other parts of the world where they also get conditions that reduce visibility very rapidly, the main analogy, or the main type of impact out there that's very similar to this is dense fog. And I think if any of you all have experienced dense fog, it's very similar in a dust storm. if you can hit a dense fog bank, and I said other parts of the world, we get the dense fog actually all over the Southwest as well, and as do people all across the country. But dense fog might be an example that more people can relate to, especially people who are not from here. They might. We have a lot of people who are from the Northeast or the Midwest or some other part of the country, and what they might be able to relate to is remembering the dense fog banks that they've driven into, and how all of a sudden your visibility is just zero. And some of the deadliest accidents in both dense blowing dust or dense fog have been associated with the dense fog and the dense blowing dust. We're talking about accidents where the pileups are miles long along a freeway here in the United States, or maybe an Autobahn in Germany, where the pileups are just literally miles long, and where the death toll could actually go into the dozens. That happened. Right. That happens, and it's from a rapid reduction in visibility. That's the enemy of the driver. You've got to respect it.
It is, and you gave some great tips there, talking about, because people don't understand, you need to get off the road and get out of the lane, because the car behind you they're not stopping, they're going forward. Get off to the side, take your foot off the brake, and a lot of people miss that, because, and just like James said, if people are right behind you, they're going to see your brake lights and they're going to, well, I thought I was in the road, but it looks like the road's off to the right. So they're going to steer off to the right to where you are, and they're just going to slam into the back of you. So get as far off to the road as you can. Get your foot off the brake, turn your engine off, get your car in, like he said, in park, and just wait it out. Most of the time, these don't last very long, and the visibility, just like James said, comes back up pretty fast. Now, I got a question on Facebook talking about, we mentioned earlier the WEA alerts, the WEA alerts, and I was wondering, Carrie or Tom, if either one of you guys could talk about, the question was, how do they get the WEA alerts? Do they need to sign up for them, or is that something that they should get automatically?
So WEA, that stands for wireless emergency alerts, and as James said, dust storm warnings, but also flash flood warnings, as well as tornado warnings. There's others that are on there, tsunami warnings, for example, and you automatically receive that on your phone. Now you can, or you do have the option to opt out, but of course we don't encourage that. But anytime you travel, as James said, into that polygon, whether it's for a dust storm, whether it's for a flash flood, whether it's for a tornado, then your phone will automatically go off. We've all, I suspect, have had Amber Alerts in your local area, and those have certainly, your phone makes a very odd sound that you might not have heard. Now, of course, it's been around for several years, so maybe you're familiar with it now, but that's what WEA is. Tremendous. I think it's probably one of the best in terms of notification, a great leap forward in terms of warning the traveling public in terms of these hazards, right? That's what WEA is. So it's as James said, it's a tremendous asset, and adding that dust storm warning really narrows down, or the ability to narrow down that threat area is going to be a huge leap forward. So, we've had them in Albuquerque with various events that we've had.
Very good, and I'll agree with you. There was at one time, when we would issue a warning, severe thunderstorm warning, or a flash flood warning, or a tornado warning, and people would go, "I didn't get it. I didn't get," and they look at you like, why didn't I get this message? And, I wanted to say, I wish I could call each individual person that was in the warned area, but that's just not something that's practical until now. This is essentially the Weather Service calling you and saying you are in harm's way. So when your phone makes a noise, you need to take it seriously and take action. I'll ask Tom, what have you seen as far as, these WEA alerts being used for various things? Have you seen it improve the way people can react and kind of get out of harm's way?
Yeah, I think we've seen a pretty good improvement on that. We use I guess a secondary alerting, a text in service through
Mm-hmm.
Nixle, and we've actually seen our numbers grow pretty significantly. Now we don't send out every single weather alert. We try and look at the totality of a storm. So maybe those folks that are 5 or 10 miles ahead that wouldn't get the alert right away. We look at really that perspective of if they, that the purpose of the WIA alerts is that those folks there. So it's we've seen that. We've gotten some really good feedback on that, and then hitting it through all the different methods. Social media being kind of the one big thing. And I think maybe kind of my closing is I think that the concern that we always have is people not taking it seriously. They joke, and we joke here, probably no different than Arizona or El Paso. But if you don't like the weather, just wait 5 minutes. And I think we always look at it from that perspective, saying, well, that storm will pass. In 5 minutes it will be sunny, and in that 5 minutes, we could have some pretty significant damage occur.
Definitely. So, well, guess what, guys? It's already been 30 minutes. So I appreciate you taking your time. I did get one question asking about the current forecast for Hurricane Bob. So I wanted to show that real quick. So basically, today was blazing hot across parts of southern New Mexico into Arizona. Tomorrow's probably the hottest day for southern Arizona. But it was 105 at least, I think, in El Paso today. But as you can see here, we've got tropical moisture on the way. And we were talking, and I'll ask Carrie this real quick. Can you remember a tropical storm this early in the season impacting the Southwest?
Not this early. Nope. The nearest year, Tim, that I was thinking about was 1996. I don't know if anybody remembers June of 1996. It wasn't quite the setup, but we had a very horrible dry stretch that year that ended, at least in Albuquerque, we ended with the wettest last half of June on record. And it was I think it was like the second driest January 1 through mid-June on record. So we went literally from one extreme to the other in the matter of days. So, but no, this is, I don't recall something this early.
So it will be very interesting to see if this track holds to pass. What I saw today in the office, all the computer models are now kind of converging on this solution coming up the Baja and then impacting the initial brunt of the moisture moving into southeast Arizona. I know, James, you're right on the edge there. They were talking about how it could either be feast or famine for you there in Phoenix. You could either get a lot of rain or no rain at all, kind of thing. But then there's a trough, that's an area of low pressure that's going to swing on through, and it's going to sweep that across New Mexico. So it will be interesting to see. And like I mentioned before, we are literally going to go from the heat to potential for lightning and downburst winds Thursday and Friday to flash floods on Saturday and Sunday across the Southwest U.S. So it could be interesting several days. And, it just kind of stresses or kind of reinforces the fact that each day during monsoon season, there could be just a different threat that you just need to be aware of and just be ready to take action. If it's heat, you check on your elderly, you check on your pets, you make sure you can get a little air conditioning, make sure you take plenty of fluids. Dust or downburst winds, make sure that if you see the haboob, the wall of dust headed towards you, that you pull over, get out, wait it out. Don't try to drive through it because too many times somebody has stopped in front of you or somebody's going to come up behind you real quick. Then tomorrow we're going to have another hangout, same time. It will be talking about lightning. And then I think on Thursday, we're going to be talking about flash flooding, and then we'll wrap things up on Friday. So like I said, this week could be very interesting. It's really great talking about all these threats, but we could actually see them all as we work our way through the week. So I want to thank everybody who were able to join us on Facebook and on Twitter and on YouTube for joining us. Thanks to my panel here. We had James over in Phoenix. We had Carrie and not far away, we had Tom. So thank you guys so much for joining us. It was great chatting with you. And like I said, everybody enjoy the weather, but stay weather aware. Have a great day. Bye-bye.
Bye.